Hello, I'm Kurt Lidke, Executive Director of Klamath Film, and you just watched The Caretaker in our Southern Shorts category for the Klamath Independent Film Festival. Joining us now is the director and writer of this film, Martin Hilligoss. Martin, thank you so much for taking some time out for us.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
I love the look of this film. Really well done cinematography. Particularly, it has an interesting dichotomy to it because the opening scenes really set the mood of what feels like it's going to be a happy, innocent film, and there's really vibrant colors. The outdoor look is beautiful, and then as the film twists darker and it gets into night, your color palette seems to change as the film progresses too, to give more kind of an ominous, sinister tone. Was that intentional or just kind of fortuitous with the different settings of day and night?
Yeah, well, it started intentional with the writing and just setting up the status quo in the daytime, so to create the most juxtaposition for the end. And so sort of trying to find that line with the cinematography as well. So the contrast ratio starts more like a 4-to-1, and by the end of the movie, it's like a 16-to-1 contrast ratio, just to create the most contrast from beginning to middle and end.
Hmm.
So yeah, that is intentional, because more contrast creates more drama subconsciously.
When that works well, it's very impactful, and the music that you used also kind of adds to that, where it starts off very happy and innocent. In a lot of ways, it's almost like a twist on some of those classic horror tropes, or even like old Disney movies, where you start off with the innocent character who's all loving and happy and pure in the forest, and then it suddenly takes a sinister turn going down. So I liked the way that you used all of those elements. So did any of those classic films or story tropes inspire The Caretaker, or where did the story come from?
The story sort of came from my idea of having a protagonist who is recently homeless and living out of a car, because I've just been seeing that so much, and so many people are out of work and are doing whatever they can to get an opportunity. And so it was just interesting for me to think about that for a protagonist, and to think about what somebody might do for a potential job opportunity. Um, and it kind of has that theme of, like, is blood thicker than water, and like, what would you do to get your chance, in this current environment. I definitely was inspired by, like, the opening shot is very inspired by The Shining, like the opening aerial photography. And the music, actually, it's really funny. It was composed by a good friend and an Oregon composer named Brendan Brick. And what I told him is that I wanted to start like the Goonies and turn into Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so I think that really gave him a pretty free palette to play with. And we shot back a few notes, and yeah, I really love his music. So yeah.
Terrific. So this is one of two films that you have in this year's Klamath Independent Film Festival, Isolated being the other one, and both use the same locations. Were they shot at the same time, or did you just really like that cabin, or what?
I work with what I have, and luckily my parents have this cabin up at Lake of the Woods, and so growing up, that has sort of been my studio in a way. They were not shot at the same time. They were shot about 6 months apart from each other. But yeah, I mean, every time I'm up there, it's just like a new idea pops into my head. But it's starting to get to the point where it's like, might have to start looking for new locations. Otherwise, going to be making the same movie over and over again.
Well, if you're going to use a spot, I mean, for those who don't know, Lake of the Woods is a little bit northwest of Klamath Falls here, and I mean, beautiful setting. I mean, you
Hmm.
basically just have to turn the camera on and point it in a direction, and you're going to get a gorgeous look. So.
Make sure it's in focus, and you're a cinematographer. Yeah.
The cast and crew for this film, I know it was pretty minimal, but were they folks that you had worked with on previous projects?
Yeah. So for the Caretaker, all of these friends I actually met probably like 7 years ago at a summer program at USC, and we've stayed in touch. And I said, like, this summer, let's go up to the cabin. Let's make a movie. They were all in for it. So we rented some equipment, and they showed up in my house after the 11-hour drive from Los Angeles at 3 in the morning, my dog barking, and then they drove home 4 days later. So it was, yeah, very minimal. We're all good friends. Just a really fun project.
Fantastic. Well, you alluded to it in the Goonies turning into Texas Chainsaw Massacres mention, but this film does have some classic horror tropes to it, from the drugged drink to the off-kilter kind of line delivery of the caretaker and the whole innocent and distressed thing. I love those little homages thrown in. Was that intentional, having the film as kind of a subtle tribute to the whole thriller genre? Because I at least recognize aspects of everything from, I mean, there's parts that you could say come from maybe King Kong a little bit, as far as the innocent being sacrificed, to
Right.
creature films like, Cabin in the Woods or Lake Placid, or even Jaws and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It stands as its own piece, but it has those little subtle nods in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's a combination of everything I love, I think. And and I think sometimes it's important to combine the familiar with the unique, and so it's, like, there are a lot of tropes there from other things, but you kind of put all these things together, and then you have this protagonist that we haven't seen very much, and then it ends up with a creature in the water, and then suddenly they all kind of come together, and it sort of becomes its own thing. And so very, very heavily inspired by all of those things you mentioned. Absolutely. Yes.
Great. Uh, so it was a 4-day shoot, and I've done that 10-plus hour drive between LA and Oregon many, many times. So I know it all too well, and we can commiserate on that if need be. But any behind the scenes stories that you can share about the production that were particularly funny, memorable, or otherwise?
Well, we had a great time the whole time. I'd say one sort of funny thing, not to throw my cinematographer Adam under the bus, but they were in their rush to get out of their apartment and come up here. They forgot the gimbal that we were supposed to
Oh,
use for all of the opening stuff, and he calls me 3 hours in. I forgot the gimbal, and I'm just like, I can't get mad because they're doing so much, for me for free. So it's just like, all right, we'll rethink it. So that first sequence in the daytime was basically us trying to figure out how we can shoot what I wanted to do handheld, or if we could put it on another gimbal or use a different camera and do. And so basically, that's why the opening shot is handheld.
okay. Well, and I was wondering, because you do have some beautiful drone shots in this at the beginning, and then some of the opening shots are kind of more static. Uh,
Right.
so that would explain why of
Yeah.
leaving the gimbal back in LA.
Right. And those drone shots are shot by my good friend Taylor Humphrey, who's a local filmmaker as well, with the DJI Mavic 2. So I just want to shout out to Taylor for those great shots.
Yeah, and there's a lot of similarity between this film and Isolated, as far as the settings go and just the cinematography and in general. The You get a very similar look in both films. So what equipment did you use for it?
Um, for the Caretaker, the opening daytime stuff is shot with a red Scarlett 5K, and then the drone shots are with the Mavic 2. And then as soon as we go to night, we go to the Blackmagic and shoot at the dual native ISO of 3200. And then I have an SLR Magic lens that's a T.95. So that combined with the 3200 ISO just really lets you do amazing stuff in low light. Um, so yeah, and then Isolated. Maybe we want to talk about this when we talk about Isolated, but that was shot with the A7S2.
Okay, great. What other projects have you worked on besides The Caretaker and Isolated?
So last year in the festival, two of my films were in it as well: Wind Chimes and Runner. Runner was a short film that I made in my first production class at USC, and Wind Chimes was something that we shot in Springfield and Eugene, actually, while I was at the University of Oregon.
Terrific. What do you hope that people take away from your film, The Caretaker?
I hope they have fun. I like to combine sort of escapist cinema adventure films with relevant messaging. And so I hope it was a fun watch. I hope you took something away from it, and we had a lot of fun making it. So
I know it was kind of a whirlwind production and a very long, boring drive. I hate that drive between LA and Oregon so much because there's two turns total. It's just like straight line.
right,
Uh, but yeah, I always look forward to Grapevine because at least it's something different with the scenery.
yeah, it's
uh,
the climax of the drive.
did you learn anything in the course of production of The Caretaker that you can apply to future projects that you do?
I learned so much from everybody. And my cinematographer Adam is just really really great with light, and I learn a lot every time I work with him. Um, as well as just like more emphasis on production design, I would say is sort of something I want to work on. And my friend Tyler, who did a lot of production design, has certainly helped me just embrace that. Is like it's just so important.
Well, there's a lot of elements that I like to this film. Obviously, the cinematography and the color palette that you used, and the way that that helps kind of set the tone that we talked about, the horror tropes in there. But you mentioned it a little bit as far as your direction there with your cast. The original Caretaker, that spoilers, although people just watched it, gets eaten by the creature in the lake. His line delivery really stands out to me. I don't know if that was intentional with your direction or not, but as a little um, off-putting and weird, but in a reminiscent way of films like it's a known as the best worst movie, but Troll 2 kind of comes to mind for me in terms of the way that some characters um, said their lines in such an odd way that kind of adds to the whole kind of horror genre
I love that
of
you
things.
dropped Troll too. That's so great. Yeah, uh, it's interesting because he's this maniac living in this cabin who's trying to get by with his job, but he's acting himself to try to convey some sort of comfort to
Hmm.
Robert when he comes. And so it is an interesting thing to have this guy acting in a movie the actor is acting in. And so it does sort of create a very odd performance that I embrace. And my friend Noah, who is the actor, sometimes we just like to play with stuff and just really go in weird directions. So we felt like this was a good opportunity for it.
The creature itself we never actually see in the film. I'm sure that making special effects creatures is hard and expensive, so I can understand that standpoint. But you also kind of take the Jaws approach with that, where you can hear it and it's there and it's ominous, but you don't actually get to see it till the very end, which I like that aspect of horror thrillers thrown in. Um, what isn't so clear with it, or maybe left open to audience interpretation, is the concept of the caretaker role, whether the caretaker and who that person is on the phone, whether the job is actually taking care of the creature and why. Is there sort of a addendum to your film that can help explain some of the story, or do you want to leave that open to audience interpretation?
Um, I guess a little bit of both, but just to explain it a little bit, yeah, it's this idea that this man who owns the cabin has discovered this creature and is paying people to feed it because he wants to keep it alive for his own sake. And to be completely transparent, that side element of it isn't like completely fleshed out, and certainly I've thought about like adapting this into other things, and I'm actually taking bits and pieces of this and writing a feature that's roughly based about this. Um, but yeah, it is supposed to be left up to interpretation if he's going to continue to kill other people via, the monster, or if he's going to figure out another way to take care of it. But he got the job opportunity he wanted.
Terrific. Well, are there any final thoughts about your film that you'd like to share?
I mean, I just would love to thank everybody that helped me do it. I mean, I know everybody says that, but they're like my friends that came up and helped me with this. I will be forever grateful for them, and Adam for lighting this this thing very, very well and helping me shoot this. And just for my actors' commitment, Josh and Noah, they're really great. And Brendan with the music, I think the music really, really helped sell this thing. He did a great job. And my good friend Taylor, just want to thank you all for all the help and thank everybody for wanting to watch it, and it's just such a fun thing. I'm so grateful to be able to make movies and be a part of the Southern Oregon film community. So
Yeah, absolutely. The music sets the tone so much, and especially for this kind of genre. I mean, just imagine watching Jaws without the soundtrack. How boring that would be.
right,
Or Friday the 13th without the breathing sounds. Just like they would be terrible movies without that. And the soundtrack really works well to kind of accent what's going on in this film. So kudos for that. Well, thank you, Martin, so much for this film. And in addition to being available online all weekend through Eventive, people can catch The Caretaker in person at the Ross Ragland Theater here in Klamath Falls on Sunday, September 20th at 6:30 p.m. for the 8th Annual Klamath Independent Film Festival. Thank you so much for taking some time out for us.
thank you for having me.